when obedience to God requires disobedience to men. Exodus chapter 1 opens not with miracles, plagues, or parted seas, but with a quiet moral crisis before Moses, before Pharaoh's downfall, before the Red Sea. There was a decision ordinary people had to make. Will we obey an unjust command, or will we fear God more than authority? This chapter exposes a truth many prefer to avoid. Evil often advances not because of monsters, but because of obedience without conscience. Pharaoh's policy, legal, ordered, and evil. Pharaoh did not initially command open genocide. He acted gradually, strategically, and legally. First came oppression, then forced labor, finally a command cloaked as population control. When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a son, kill him, but if it is a daughter, let her live. This was not mob violence. This was state policy. It came with authority, structure, and consequences for disobedience. It was given to professionals, midwives, people trained to preserve life. The command was clear. The expectation was compliance. The midwives' resistance, fear of God over fear of power. Scripture names the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. Their inclusion is intentional. God records the names of those who resisted, but leaves Pharaoh unnamed. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. This is one of the earliest examples of biblical civil disobedience. They did not protest publicly. They did not stage a revolt. They simply refused to obey an immoral command. Their resistance was quiet, costly, and courageous, and God's response is striking. So God was kind to the midwives, and because the midwives feared God, He gave them families of their own. God did not rebuke them for disobedience to authority. He rewarded them. I was just following orders, a timeless excuse. Throughout history, the same defense echoes whenever injustice is exposed. I was just following orders. I didn't make the policy. I was doing my job. If I didn't do it, someone else would. This excuse has been used by soldiers, police, bureaucrats, doctors, and civilians alike. It surfaced prominently during the Nuremberg trials after World War II, when perpetrators of atrocities defended themselves by appealing to authority. Yet Exodus 1 dismantles this argument at its root. The midwives could have said, "We didn't create the law, we answered a Pharaoh. Disobedience could cost our lives." But Scripture honors them precisely because they chose moral accountability over institutional obedience. Authority has limits. The Bible does not teach blind obedience to human authority, while Scripture affirms order and governance. It consistently establishes a higher law. When commands from men contradict the commands of God, the Bible's position is clear. We must obey God rather than human beings. Civil disobedience in Scripture is not rebellion for personal gain, but obedience to divine conscience. Daniel disobeyed royal decrees. The Hebrew boys refused to bow. The apostles kept preaching when ordered to stop. And the midwives refused to kill. In each case, the cost was real, but obedience to God was non-negotiable. Modern parallels civilian systems and complicity. Today, injustice often hides behind systems rather than swords. Decisions are distributed across departments, committees, and chains of command, making personal responsibility feel diluted. A soldier launches a strike, a technician programs a system, a doctor follows a protocol, a clerk processes paperwork, a citizen stays silent. Each person can say, "I was just doing my part." Exodus 1 confronts this fragmentation of responsibility. It insists that moral agency does not disappear inside systems. God does not judge institutions alone. He judges individuals within them. Shiphrah and Puah were not policymakers. They were workers, yet God held them responsible and honored them for their choice. Fear of God is the foundation of resistance. What enabled the midwives to resist was not political ideology, but fear of God. Fear of God produces moral clarity when laws become corrupt, courage when consequences are severe, resistance when obedience becomes sin. Without fear of God, people fear loss of job, status, safety, or approval more than injustice itself. With fear of God, obedience is redefined. Conclusion. The question Exodus 1 asks us. Exodus 1 does not ask whether commands are legal. It asks whether they are righteous. It does not ask who issued the order. It asks whom you fear more. In every generation, there comes a moment when neutrality becomes participation and silence becomes consent. Exodus 1 reminds us that God watches what we do when authority demands what conscience forbids. And history, like scripture, remembers not those who said, "I was just following orders." But I fear God.